Coming up, the Blue World team visits a massive World War II shipwreck graveyard. Welcome to Jonathan Bird's Blue World.
In 1941, the Japanese Empire attacked Pearl Harbor, announcing to the world that it had declared war upon the United States. For several decades before the surprise attack, Japan had been quietly taking over islands and atolls all over the Pacific, establishing bases closer and closer to U.S. soil. The largest and most important base was Truk Atoll, known today as Chuuk. With a ring of coral islands surrounding a massive protected lagoon, Chuuk offered a safe harbor for Japanese warships and supply vessels. In early 1944, the United States began Operation Hailstone, a siege of Chuuk to remove the Japanese occupation. Nine aircraft carriers, 7 battleships, and numerous cruisers, destroyers, and submarines converged on Chuuk in their own surprise attack. Over a 3-day battle, the U.S. Navy sank 10 Japanese warships and 30 supply ships. They also hit the island ground facilities and aircraft before they could even take off. Operation Hailstone crushed the Japanese base at Chuuk utterly and completely. It also created the largest single collection of sunken ships in the world. 27 years later, in 1971, legendary French underwater explorer and filmmaker Jacques Cousteau released a documentary called Lagoon of Lost Ships about the wrecks of Chuuk and put it on the bucket list of every scuba diver for years to come.
Truk, a tropical atoll on the eastern tip of the Caroline Islands. Its lagoon a burial ground for a vast fleet of ships.
Today, more than 80 years after the Battle of Operation Hailstone, Chuuk still maintains legendary status as the world's top wreck diving destination. After several days of flights, the Blue World film crew, Todd, Wes, and I have finally arrived. It took us like 3 days, but we're here. We're finally here.
We don't know where here is, but we're here.
We are here, look.
State of Chuuk.
Here it is, there it is. Boom! We made it! We board the Truk Odyssey, a liveaboard dive boat that is almost as legendary as the wrecks themselves. This huge vessel will be our home away from home, not to mention dive shop and restaurant, for the duration of our trip. And we can't wait to get started. Our first task is to get our gear assembled. Todd and I have brought our KISS Sidewinder rebreathers with the expectation of some serious wreck exploration.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your first diving day on Odyssey.
We meet Hunter Viverito, who will be our dive master for the whole week. And he starts us off with a lecture on our first wreck, the Kiyosumi Maru.
Most of the time, we will be swinging over top of the wreck.
Hunter jumps into his gear for our first dive, not realizing just how long it's going to take me and Todd to put these rebreathers on.
When we do this cave diving,
We do this in the water, and it's like way easier to be floating in the water doing this than to be sitting on a deck. Just below the Odyssey, we encounter what looks like an enormous coral reef. Built in 1934 as a cargo and passenger ship, the Kiyosumi Maru was appropriated by the Imperial Japanese Navy in 1941 and refitted as a lightly armed cargo ship to move war supplies. Using a technique called photogrammetry, underwater photographer Holger Boos produced a detailed 3D model of the Kiyosumi Maru in its current condition. Lying on her port side in 31 meters of water, the starboard hull is a big flat expanse of metal, providing a place for coral to grow. And the huge torpedo holes in the hull can be seen on the bottom of the wreck. A few artifacts that fell out of the wreck have been set up on top of the starboard side for divers to check out. Among the more interesting ones is a pair of binoculars on a tripod. Unfortunately, they seem to be missing a few key optical components. We follow Hunter down into one of the holds. Soft coral and hydroids grow on the metal. Moving between holds, we find a big box with a hole in it. It's a metal shipping container that's still filled with explosive shells, so we look but don't touch. Because the ship is on its side, when we go out through what looks like a doorway, we're actually going through a hole in the ceiling. Back outside, we see that the wreck is covered in coral, clams, sponges, algae, and other encrusting marine life, hiding the metal beneath. The ocean is slowly taking the ship back. Light is shining through the blast hole at the bottom of the hold. The masts, once vertical, are now horizontal in the ship's final resting place. Hunter leads the way into a decayed hole through the decking turned sideways. Inside, we find a bank of gas cylinders used for holding oxygen, generated by a nearby oxygen generator. And tucked away in a corner of the hold, my favorite treasure of this wreck, a bicycle. The spokes have long since rusted away. We head back out of the wreck and examine the incredible amount of life on a mast. Gorgonians and sea fans festoon the masts because the water moves past bringing food. Then we ascend shallower. Back on top of the wreck, a school of Anthias live among the coral, completely unaware that their home is built upon a skeleton of human creation and folly. Nearby, I find a porthole. Cleaning the glass, I wonder what it would look like from the inside, but I won't find out today. Back at the Artifact Museum where we started, we find beer bottles, lanterns, and dishes. Then it's time to ascend back to the Odyssey. There's a bar under the stern at 15 feet where we can hang on and do a safety stop. It's especially helpful when it's windy and the boat is swinging at anchor. But there's something even cooler. They have a diver elevator, which makes getting out of rough water in side mount gear really easy.
Kind of rough down there.
After a surface interval, we're suiting up again. Over the course of a week, we'll be doing this a lot.
Thank you. Where are you?
This time, I'm trying out the elevator to go into the water. I can get used to this royal treatment. Sinking down into the blue, we find our target for this dive, a little smaller than the last dive. It's a Mitsubishi G4M twin-engine medium bomber, operated by the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service. Because of its cylindrical shape and tendency to catch fire when hit, Japanese Navy pilots often referred to the G4M as hamaki, which loosely translates to lit cigar. The American system of nicknaming enemy planes always gave female names to bombers, and they called it the Betty Bomber. Nobody knows if this unfortunate Betty Bomber was shot down or just missed the nearby runway, but she landed on the water slowly enough that she didn't completely come apart. The crash destroyed the nose, but the main fuselage, wings, and tail are mostly intact. On the tail, the vertical stabilizer vanished, but the horizontal stabilizers have become a host to coral. The fabric of the control surfaces is gone, leaving just a skeleton of the elevators. Algae growing on the left wing make a delicious meal for a school of surgeonfish. We probably have them to thank for such a clean aluminum surface that doesn't look like it's been underwater for over 80 years. The tip of the right wing broke off. Inside the broken wingtip, some squirrelfish have made a nice home with a colorful coral entryway. Just below where the wing meets the fuselage, I find a bubble coral. And within the bubble coral, a cleaner shrimp living in luxury, enjoying the protection of a venomous coral bouncy house. On top of the fuselage, the top gunner's hatch is open. The machine gun here was meant to protect against threats approaching from above. And it's not as big as it looks. Inside, we can get an impression of how claustrophobic this may have felt to the crew in combat. With a thin skin and almost no armor, a Betty Bomber was a dangerous assignment. For the new residents, however, there seems to be ample protection from the occasional intruders. Exiting where the cockpit used to be, Todd and I continue our exploration. For some reason, I'm drawn to the left wing. Maybe it's because I know that in side mount I can fit under there. So I have a look. The engine once sat in this cowling, and it's no longer here. But Hunter has something to show us. He leads us away from the aircraft. Surrounding the plane, we find beautiful, healthy reefs. And we keep swimming. After a while, we approach a solitary coral head. Is that a propeller sticking out with a blob of coral growing on the end? I swim up for a closer look. I immediately see the telltale sign of cylinder head cooling fins. This is one of the giant Mitsubishi 14-cylinder, 1,500 horsepower radial engines. When the plane hit the water, both engines came out, skimming across the water and sinking quite a distance from the aircraft. Not too far away, we find the other engine. The propeller, its design licensed from American company Hamilton Standard, stands in defiance of its fate in a watery grave. Sadly, not a single flying condition Mitsubishi G4M remains in existence. This piece of history is lost. After lunch, Hunter gives me a Chuuk wreck geography lesson.
The main anchorages that we dive that have a whole heap of different wrecks, we have.
And then it's time to put all the gear on once again. But eventually, we finally hit the water. We're exploring the wreck of the Yamagiri Maru, another ship resting on its side. Built in 1938 as a commercial cargo ship, the Yamagiri Maru was requisitioned in 1941 for military cargo. Visualization with Holger Buse's amazing 3D photogrammetry model shows that the Yamagiri is quite similar to the Kiyosumi. She's resting on her port side, and there's a huge blast hole on the starboard side. So, like the Kiyosumi, the Yamagiri has a lot of coral and algae growing on the starboard side, like a natural reef. As Todd and I drop down over the edge into the deck area, which is of course vertical due to the ship's position, we start to see even more colorful life living on structures sticking out, like the stern telegraph and the boom arms. But Hunter is taking us inside the wreck, where all the really cool stuff is. With everything turned sideways, it can be confusing. Staircases that should go up and down go left and right. But some of them do seem to go up and down because they've corroded and fallen. We're in the engine room, and there's not much marine growth in here, so we can make out details like valve handles a lot easier. We find an engine, but it's far too small to be the ship's engine. It has some cool gauges that catch my eye. I film the valves of the cylinder head. As I continue to investigate, I see the generator connected to the crankshaft. This was one of the ship's electric generators. We continue through the maze of the engine room. On the wall, someone has brushed away the rusty silt particles on an electric box, so we can clearly see the white terminals. We drop deeper into the room, and I follow Hunter along a passage of bent metal and destruction. He stops and turns, pointing his light at something on the sideways walkway. I move in, struggling to see what it is, and soon I recognize the grisly shape of a hand, the bones of some poor crew member killed in the sinking of the ship. I struggle to maintain perfect buoyancy to film this artifact without touching it or touching anything near it, out of respect to this as a war grave. Then we're on the move again, heading towards the number 5 hold, where Hunter wants to show us something. We sneak through a hole in the bulkhead between the engine room and the hold. This is definitely not a doorway that was included in the ship's design, but one created by the forces of nature. Inside the hold, we can see the ribs of the ship that form the shape of the hull and hold the skin of the ship in place. This is the deepest part of the dive, but we only hit 106 feet, so we have time to look around. In a large jumble of cargo scattered across the bottom of the hold, Hunter has pointed out a curious item. These are the 18-inch armor-piercing shells carried for the fleet's biggest battleships. Each shell weighs over 3,000 pounds and had a range of 36 miles. Needless to say, we keep a wide berth on these. Finally, it's time to start making our way out of the wreck. Fortunately, the Yamagiri has so many openings to open water that we're never fully out of sight of the blue. As it's getting later in the day, the ambient light outside is lower, so my video lights make a bigger impact bringing out the color. I spend a few minutes filming stuff outside the wreck, including a sea turtle. But soon we make our way back to the Odyssey and spend some time on the hang bar doing a safety stop. Then I hop on the elevator.
Woo! Man, that engine room was so spooky and cool. That was wicked fun. That's my kind of wreck diving. That was really fun.
The thing about diving the wrecks of Chuuk is that there are quite a few to explore. So far, we've only scratched the surface, so stay tuned. We have many more Blue World adventures to come, diving the wrecks of Chuuk Lagoon. Hey everyone, check out the link in the description for a look at Holger Boos's website with 3D models of wrecks all over the world.